First of all, hello everyone. Thank you for coming to what we hope will be a fabulous discussion with our very interesting guests. My name is Isabel. I'm the Education Officer for Pink Week, and joining me today to chair this panel are Aish, the President of Pink Week, and Vice President B. Now, to our guests.
So we thought we'd just let our guests introduce themselves. So we're just going to go around the circle and they can just say a little bit about who they are and what they can bring, well, not what they can bring, but what they'll be bringing to the conversation, which the topic today is controversies of breast cancer. So, Caroline, you want to kick us off?
Hi, my name is Caroline Hoffman. I'm the Clinical and Research Director for Breast Cancer Haven, a breast cancer charity. And we have centres around the country where we provide places for people to get emotional support, help with side effects of treatment, and to learn how to live a healthier lifestyle, sort of mentally, emotionally, and physically. And we also have stuff on our website. So I've been working in this field, working with people affected by cancer and breast cancer since the early 90s. So it's my passion, and I hope I have a couple of things to say.
Hi, I'm Charlie. So I work for Breast Cancer Now. So we have recently merged as a charity with Breast Cancer Care. So Breast Cancer Now funded historically research to try and find a cure and a prevention and treatment for breast cancer. Breast Cancer Care funded support and care for those currently going through a diagnosis. So the idea was the two charities have the same end goal. So if we come together, we can save a bit of money and hopefully get some better stuff going. I work in a team that is purely fundraising. So any of the science stuff tonight is very not my thing. So I'm sorry in advance. But I work with people who are just doing any number of crazy challenges. So running marathons, cycling 1,000 miles, doing ultra challenges, swimming, all of those kind of stuff. That's who I work with.
I'm Emma Campbell. I'm an author, a speaker, and a cancer patient. I was diagnosed with breast cancer 10 years ago for the first time. And then again, I had my first recurrence 4 years ago, and then last year I was told I had cancer for the third time. So, yeah, I'm a lifelong cancer patient. I'm on targeted chemo, which I have at the Marsden in London. And I write a lot and talk a lot about my journey on Instagram in particular, and my memoir was published 1.5 years ago.
And also, if you are interested, at the end of the panel, Emma has a couple of books that she will be selling, if you'd like to buy one.
I'm Ellie. I'm a second-year medic at Cambridge. I'm here partly as CATS, which is Cancer Awareness of Teenagers and Young People Society, but also I've got a history of cancer myself. I had leukemia when I was a teenager. And then the past 2 years at Cambridge, I've had cancer both years. Yeah, I think I'm just here to kind of share my experiences with that. And then also, I'm also a student representative for Click Sergeant, so looking from that background as well.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great, thank you. I'm sure it will be a fantastic discussion. So I think to start off, we'd like to kick off with some questions from us for about half an hour to 40 minutes, and then we'll open it up to the audience, if that's okay. So this is a fairly simple question, and I think I'll just address it to everyone. So breast cancer awareness campaigns are often criticised for being too pink. There's a fear that this both romanticises breast cancer and alienates the albeit small group of male breast cancer sufferers. What are your thoughts on these criticisms, and how should organisations such as yours and Pink Week rectify this imbalance?
So just feel free to go for it.
Well, shall I start?
Yeah.
So Breast Cancer Haven, I've got my little logo on. You need very good eyesight to see it. But it's actually purple background with the A of Haven being a pink ribbon. So I think what I would say is, for those of us who are old enough to remember, the pink ribbon followed very soon after the red ribbon for AIDS. So that was invented, well, kind of created. The red ribbon was created in 1991, and then Evelyn Lauder came up, co-created the pink ribbon in 1992 as a symbol for breast cancer. So I think, from my point of view, it's become an iconic symbol. So it's easily identifiable, and it's been used all over the world. So from that point of view, I think it's helpful. On the pinkness, I think what I love about pink is that in the 18th century, men wore pink because it was a faded form of red, which was the colour for men in battle and all that sort of thing. So pink was actually quite a male colour. So it's interesting how things change in terms of colours and time.
I think the pink and fluffy aspect as a cancer patient, it's so easily recognisable, and we all we think of breast cancer. That is the colour linked very clearly to breast cancer. I don't relate to the pink fluffy side of it at all, but I agree that it is a very iconic symbol, and I think a lot of cancers have their own colour. I'm not sure what the others are, but I know that the badges that you know they'll so it's a really tricky one because we want to do whatever we can to raise awareness, but at the same time it does feel that possibly it is quite not outdated as a symbol, but there could be a way of moving forward with how it's portrayed and how it's, you know, and bringing in a more diverse, you know, bringing in the one in 553 men that are diagnosed with male breast cancer. So I think there's a way to go, but I personally don't have a problem with proudly wearing a lovely pink pin on my coat.
That's good to hear. That's a pink one.
I think something that we've been trialling for, so when we merged charities, it's really recent. It's less than a year that our new charity has existed. We did so much work around this kind of topic as well because, so Breast Cancer Care had been a charity for 30 years previously, and we were more than willing to hold our hands up and say some of this stuff is a bit historic and does need a freshen up. So we had a lot of conversations with a lot of our supporters about colours because we know it's really important to people. So within our new colour palette, we have 4 different colours. This is about to sound really brandy. We have 4 colours. And the 2 main ones that we use as a charity are our pink and our purple, actually. And we're trialling using the pink for the times when you do need a bit of uplifting. So in my team, we use it a lot for people who are trying to run 100 kilometres over 24 hours, and all of the messaging needs to be around hope and needs to be pushing them, and we kind of don't really want to be talking about some of the more hard-hitting elements of the breast cancer, really, because it's not quite the right moment, and you really have to judge the situation with your fundraisers. But one thing we've introduced, and I think it's incredible, is the purple, because sometimes when you're talking about things, and you're talking about some of the more hard-hitting diagnosis, and you're talking to people who have really been affected by this disease, you're so right. I think the pink sometimes just isn't appropriate anymore, and it's just not the kind of things that you should be using. So we're trying to migrate over towards a purple. So it's sort of purple as if it's hard-hitting and you're talking really in depth about a diagnosis, and pink as if it's nice and fluffy and you're doing a really cool challenge and you're taking on something. But from that, I think what we've learned is that sometimes we get it wrong. And sometimes as a charity, we have to hold our hands up and say, we get it wrong. Emma and I were having this conversation just outside, actually. As a charity, not all of us know the answers. I know I have never been affected by this disease, thank goodness, and hold my hand on heart, say I never personally had it. So we're here to listen to people who have. And when some of our supporters come back and say, actually, this messaging just doesn't fit with me and I don't like the pink and I can't relate to it, I think it's our job as charities to say, okay, how can we help that? What can we do about it? So it's like a constant evolving change in that if something doesn't sit right, tell us. And let's try and do something about it.
It's interesting. It's tricky though, because over the summer I was asked to take part in, maybe it was at the beginning of October, Breast Cancer Awareness Month. There was a photo shoot, probably 30 or 40 of us, all affected by breast cancer. We were asked to come along in a pair of jeans and a pink bra, and it was fantastic Sunday afternoon outside a pink house in Notting Hill, all raising, breast cancer, maybe I don't know if it was because it was, anyway, again, I don't know which charity, I can't remember. It was a busy time. But there was no way I wasn't going to do it on principle, because, I don't, pink bra, what's that? But at the same time, because it is such a strong, you can look at a picture of a group of women in pink bras, and without any words, you know what they're raising funds for and what they're trying to raise awareness for. So,
you could use the platform and the attention
it's a
it does
platform,
have
but at the same time, it's
talk
like,
about the issues of it as well.
I'm ready for a change, certainly.
I think one of the well, so I've worked with a charity called Boobies in Manchester, and if you don't know, bees are like the kind of symbol of Manchester. So we had a massive pink bus that went round, and that was effective. But the thing is with pink, it does engage more women, even if men do it. And like, there's as someone who knows a lot of teenagers and young people who've had breast cancer, it's actually often their partner who detects the cancer, who detects the lump, because they're the one who's going to be feeling it up. So I'm not going to lie. And I think it really needs to be more inclusive in that way, that actually males get more education about what they need to look out for. And so as cats, when we went into high school, we were told to do separate talks, and we had to talk to the teachers saying, can we include them together, because it's important, like when they grow up, that they need to know what is normal for like a man or woman to look like, for like testicular cancer and everything. And it's, I think, just all-round education is much better than just focusing on one sector.
Absolutely.
But again, like the symbol of a pink ribbon is definitely something that we can all identify as that is breast cancer. Like the gold ribbon is childhood cancer.
Yes.
So, but definitely more inclusive.
Continuing on the matter of how charities need to talk about cancer, last year Cancer Research UK launched a campaign on the link between obesity and cancer and compared it to smoking. For that, they faced a major backlash, calling the campaign fat shaming and saying that obesity is not necessarily a choice. How do you feel about this campaign, and how would you have done it differently if you would have?
I think that a campaign, rather than being focused on obesity, maybe it would have been better to focus on wellness overall, because anything that kind of triggers any kind of shame or exclusion is not going to then generate the behaviours of looking at your own lifestyle and making the changes. I mean, as an example, I get very, like, I drink moderately. I don't drink a huge amount, but I like a glass of wine, and occasionally I kind of, wine, you mustn't, breast cancer, and I go into a panic, but it almost makes me want to pour myself another glass of wine. And if there was a big kind of campaign saying, with a big bottle in it, and I would be probably, it would make me aware, but it would make me scared and guilty and probably, full of an element of shame. So I think with the obesity campaign, overall wellness, I think, is the way forward.
I think for me, someone who's actually, I suffered from eating disorders for about 8 years, and I've always had that kind of question of, did my eating disorders link to my leukemia and everything? And I think that was a major source of guilt for me, and then kind of putting that onto patients that you've got cancer because of the way you're living isn't necessarily helpful.
No,
and
it really isn't.
if we look at just for example, like a program do you remember when Gok Wan used to do those
How to look good naked.
The women actually led much healthier lives afterwards when they looked into it, because they were much more confident in themselves. If you're telling someone you're obese, you're gonna get cancer because of it, it's not gonna fill them with confidence. They're not gonna want to, it's a hard hitting way to tell them to lose weight. But
you're more likely to bury your head in the sand, aren't you?
And quite a lot of these people have got bad relationships with food, and if they're being told a negative thing about it, they're probably going to turn to food. So it's like a perpetuating cycle. And I just think it would have been a much better way to, like you said, wellness. And actually, if you look at a lot of media now, they are focusing more on wellness rather than how to look good, how to get this beach body, which I think is, I think we're recognizing that different bodies can be healthy at different sizes. So. And just as an add-on to that, I had leukemia when I was doing rowing, and I know it's not breast cancer, but when I was rowing, I was doing loads of eating well and everything, and my cousins were taking drugs, having alcohol, and they didn't get anything. So really, it's kind of short-circuiting your psyche.
That's such a good point, especially because a lot of people read those signs, those posters that were completely unavoidable. They were very confrontational. And they sort of thought it meant it was causal, and it didn't necessarily mean that, and it was very vague, and I think that was also a problem, that people were there sort of making these big assumptions. That was part of the issue.
I think as well, it kind of gave people like Katie Hopkins just an excuse to kind of fat shame people, and I don't think that's ever acceptable in society.
Agreed.
But
But it's the same with recently I had I think I often, when I do something on Instagram, I don't know, there was obviously someone had picked up on what a sweet tooth I've got, and I got a message saying, oh, you know, you're doing really well, Emma, if ever you want to talk about sugar, you know, you've really come so far, but if you want to take that next step, and I was like, oh God, because I know that I eat a lot of sugar, which I know isn't great, but I'm not ready to deal with it, you know. And it's like, it was lovely of this lady to reach out in a way. It came from a really good place, but it didn't make me want to put down the green and blacks, you know.
Absolutely.
But I don't know, it's again just changing the language and...
I think that's one of the biggest things that we've learned, like as a fundraiser, is if you start shaming people and you start scaring people, nobody is going to do anything. No one is going to support you. Nobody's going to listen to you. It just isn't productive for anybody involved. So I think what you guys were saying about changing the language is vital in it, because for this campaign, if we just spun it on our head and just made it less of you shouldn't do this and more of these will be really good for you, everybody immediately just becomes a lot more engaged and wants to get involved with you. So from a charity perspective, that is all you want from your campaign, is you want people to listen and you want people to engage.
Yeah.
And if you're scaring people and you're making them feel bad, they're just not going to do that.
I think we'll touch upon this maybe a bit later as well, but I think we often find as a sort of university level charity society that a lot of our events can centre around alcohol, and then given the connections it has to cancer, we do sort of struggle on whether it's appropriate to be fundraising in that way. And I think, like, I'm sure, as I said, we'll touch upon it, but I just wanted to know how you feel about it, just because we've got quite a few events through the week that are sort of linked to or centred around alcohol.
Yeah, and also we were wondering, on a similar note, sort of, that what events are inappropriate, maybe not just with alcohol, but just fundraising events.
Like, do you ever have to say no to anybody for the events they're putting on?
Well, actually, so part of my role is working specifically with students, so I have a whole team just for student fundraising, and it's probably the biggest fight. It's not really a fight, you know what I mean, that we have within our team is a constant debate of these are our audience and this is what engages them and that's why we're here, but also it all centres back to the conversation that we're having, and obviously there are links between that kind of thing and breast cancer, and so it's just a constant toss-up between, well, we want to get people engaged, so we need to do this, but we don't want to be promoting this, so we can't do this. So we have had to say no to some events. Normally they come from a lot higher up within the charity, so if it was down to our team, we want every fundraising event ever because we think they're great. But student-focused, the biggest lesson I've learned is actually to trust you guys and the you guys we have across the country, because you know your audience way more than we do. So as a charity, if I came to you and said, we're a little bit worried about this kind of thing, we're not sure if it's appropriate, what's your opinion? You're going to know way more about it than I am. You're going to know about your Cambridge students, for example, way more than I do. Yeah, fingers crossed you do. So I think as a charity, it's also about trusting your fundraisers and trusting that if you had a gut feeling that something is not appropriate and it's not going to sit right, I trust you that you wouldn't run it. And I think that that's the best way that you can go across it, because we wouldn't exist if we didn't have incredible fundraisers. So if you guys are asking to put something on, you're doing it from a good place and it's because you think it's okay. So yes and no, I'd say.
Yeah. So I think what we're saying in this whole piece is about whether it's about trying to get messages across or whether it's trying to engage people. It's really about meeting people where they are, because we can't force people to change. And I think this is, if we want to change ourselves, we've got to start exactly where we are. So sort of putting out messages of whatever kind they are, just scare tactics or whatever, shaming people, making them feel guilty, uncomfortable, isn't going to work in any kind of, whether it's in fundraising or whether it's in actually health promotion. If we start where we are and allow people to be as they are and give people a sense of it's okay, we start where we are and we move from there, and that's how we can make any kind of behaviour change, health change, if that's what's going to happen.
It's that conversation and connection, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's all about just finding ways to be relatable, and by sharing our own stories, someone will go away with one word that's been said or one little kind of sentence that's, I struggle a lot with it's a different topic, but the kind of check your boob reminders, because with each of my diagnoses, I ignored this. I knew that there was something there, but I wasn't brave enough to say anything, even up until last year. So I sort of struggle with that feeling of, again, not shame, but, you know, I ignored and ignored. So I don't feel, in a way, I kind of occasionally will say, don't be like me, you know, don't bury your head in the sand for 14 months when you're obsessively rubbing a lump that you're not going to mention to anyone. But I struggle to kind of be one of those people who are continually forcing the message of reminding, because I think, oh, well, I didn't do it, you know, checking rather, and speaking out, you know. So it's just, we're all at different points.
Exactly. Speaking of language and sort of honesty in writing, see, in particular Emma, but your writing is very honest and often quite like open about your own experiences. And we were just wondering how appropriate do you think it is, or not appropriate, but how important it is to discuss the realities of treatment and of sort of the gory details of breast cancer, perhaps. And do you think it's ever something you're worried about causing offence, or do you just think it should all be out there on the table?
For me, again, I speak and write completely as myself, so I'm not naturally someone who would want to shock or sensationalise, but I don't know how to speak or write in a way that isn't completely honest. So therefore, just by sharing my own honest story, for me it tends to be more of my emotional experience. When I was writing my book, I was saying earlier on, it's like I couldn't sit here now and tell you the names of pretty much any of the chemo that I've been on, because I can't.
That's not
either brain fog, or it just hasn't. But I could write forever about what it really feels like to be sitting in the chemo ward, or to be sitting in the waiting room, or to have no caller ID flash up on your phone and want to be sick because you don't know what that call's going to bring. So, but I was also talking to my husband earlier about, you know, I had my second mastectomy in November, and the night before I went to see my breast surgeon, and he did that pre-op thing of getting the felt tip pen out, marking me up, you know, save the ports, you know, lift here, change the implant, you know, cross it. I looked like, you know, been scribbled all over, and my, you know, really wonky boobs at that point. And Dave took a picture, and it wasn't like, right, I'm going to put this out there, but it was like, actually, it was quite an emotional picture, and it was also a very real picture, because it wasn't blood and gore, but it was just a woman pre-surgery with pen, you know, it told 1,000. Yeah. It was a story, you know, in itself. So, and the kind of reaction from that picture on Instagram was incredible. But I've got no wish to be, oh, look at me, you know, to be sort of the gory or sensationalist in any way, but just speaking my truth. And I know that that's what gets the conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you feel the tangible relief and connection from other people who are, oh God, you know, wow, or sending their love, or kind of thinking ahead to their surgery a month down the line, and maybe feeling a little bit comforted.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
I think definitely for me. So I did a series of blogs for Teenage Cancer Trust, and I think what was recognised was actually that teenagers have quite different issues to older people, and that was when like different things started. Like it had a big effect in Teenage Cancer Trust, and that they started realising that teenagers needed more support. And that they needed separate support from adults. So actually, that kind of honesty that I had in those vlogs, what I was like, I got my like anaesthetist to video when I had a bone marrow transplant, and like when I had bone marrow taken and things like that, and just showing the honest like brutality of what I went through. And actually, being honest, actually the chemo and everything didn't really upset me that much. It was things like that I'd lost my hair, that my friends didn't know how to talk to me anymore. And people realising actually breast cancer isn't just about like any sort of cancer isn't just about what physically happens to you, it's also about what emotionally happens to you. And I think if you kind of try and like cheer it up a bit and don't tell people, I mean, you don't have to be like, oh, I was sick this many times and like this is how many bad incidents I had, but just making sure that people are aware that actually it's a big experience. And even if someone is physically cured, it doesn't necessarily mean they're cured. And I don't think
I think most cancer patients would agree that the emotional impact is far greater
Yeah, definitely.
in a lot of cases than the physical, and it's the emotional impact that lingers and lingers and lingers and lingers and changes you fundamentally forever. And whether or not you've lost a body part or you're covered in scars or, you know, or
Yeah, and I just don't think I could talk to like an audience of people by like trying to tell them that was great and all my doctors. I mean, my doctors were amazing, but I don't think they'd engage, and I don't think they'd want to support it as much if they kind of felt it was a false story I was giving. Because we're all humans, we all have hard times, and we all relate to those hard times a lot better than we do if someone's really happy.
Yeah, and I think if you leave it out, and that's just a huge part that you then feel you can't talk about, which I think is why it's so important that you two are able to, and people like you are able to sort of be honest and be open about those sort of things and inspire others to do the same.
yeah, you give permission, our own
Exactly.
honesty then opens up the,
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And I'm keen to make sure that we have time to fit in some audience questions. So, Isabel, if you just want to ask perhaps a bit more of a sciencey question just before we finish.
So my next question would be about secondary breast cancer, which is quite a big part, but receives so much less funding. Statistic from 2014 said it was only 7% of all funding for breast cancer goes to secondary breast cancer. And then last year, Breast Cancer Now launched a campaign called the Unsurvivors campaign. And I thought maybe you could tell us about that, and just more generally, we could talk about what secondary breast cancer is and why it's so important to give more funding to it.
So I guess on the funding side of it, I come from a Breast Cancer Now historic background. So I did the research charity before we were all one charity, basically. And every conversation pretty much was around how can we be funding more secondary breast cancer, and how can we be funding more projects that are looking into things like that. But it's quite difficult because sometimes it's quite easy to look at a statistic and say, okay, well, we're not funding that much. We're not funding enough at all. But it's very difficult from a research charity perspective because we're not the ones doing the scientific research. If we don't have people coming to us with ideas and wanting grants funded that are related to secondary breast cancer, we can't fund it, basically. So it's a huge cycle, and I think we're doing better. I think we're by no means there, but we're getting towards a point where we're in a better position because we've placed such a focus on it, because it's so important. But I mean, I don't know the science behind it. From what I've heard within our charity, is a difficult one to fundraise because it's such a huge topic to tackle, and because we don't know an awful lot about secondary breast cancer. Trying to pitch a grant is a lot harder when you're saying, please give me a lot of money to have a look, and here I've got some ideas, which I think is harder than when people were coming to our researchers saying, here is a very tangible piece of research that you could fund and you can get results from, sort of thing.
And just maybe for people who don't know what secondary breast cancer is, Caroline, would you possibly be able to describe it to us?
So breast cancer comes in many forms. It's many diseases, many illnesses, so it's not all one disease. But if breast cancer cells are found outside the area of the breast, so in secondary breast cancer cells, usually poorly differentiated cells, are found. The common sites they might go to are the lungs, the liver, the bone, and possibly the brain. That's usually later on. So it's breast cancer cells which have moved through the body. So it then becomes more of a systemic disease, needing a different kind of treatment than earlier disease, which is treated with surgery, usually surgery, possibly chemotherapy, plus or minus radiotherapy, and hormone treatments. So yeah.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
As a secondary breast cancer patient, which is a term. I find I struggle with labels and kind of feeling.
Feel free to pick fault with it.
No, because it is a fact. Secondary breast cancer is secondary breast cancer, but I'm very low-key about terminology. I just choose not to kind of use that in my daily vocabulary. But I know that just from everything that went on for me last year, with, thinking that we had cancer in the lung and then the second breast, but I think possibly the issues it's changed so dramatically, and the prognosis for women and men with secondary breast cancer is so much greater now than it was, that funding has all got to catch up. you know, again, the day that I was scribbled on, or no, I think it was the day when I got my mastectomy results, just before Christmas, and my surgeon said, it's so brilliant that we're in a position where that we can do this surgery on you, because 5-10 years ago, we wouldn't have put you through another mastectomy. We would have just been wanting you to get through the next couple of years, because the general kind of prognosis for someone with secondary was probably 2 to 5 years. So, and I think that's partly why I struggled a little bit with, I think the work that Breast Cancer Care, Breast Cancer Now do is incredible, but the Unsurvivors campaign, I was like, because for me it felt like, okay, on paper, secondary, stage 4, terminal, but it is changing, and they don't use the cure word, but there are situations, it might be a very small minority, where secondary breast cancer patients are living, and they would never use the cure word, but would seem to be permanently free of disease. So I struggled with the Unsurvivors campaign, because I felt like, don't you decide if I'm an unsurvivor? You know, you don't have the, you know, and it probably in my emotional state last year,
but you want
feeling
to focus on
like,
the living aspect.
I didn't feel like it was for anyone else to tell me that I was an unsurvivor. And maybe I won't be, maybe it's, you know, that day will come and I will be defeated by the disease, but I felt really strongly about that and very emotional about it, actually.
So we had a lot of conversations. Our campaign opened up so many conversations about women who are so similar to you, who said the same thing, which is really interesting. And I will be totally honest in that I wasn't involved in those conversations, and it isn't my team. But I know so many people who did say the same thing. So I think it comes back to what we were linking earlier of sometimes, and I'm not saying we got it wrong, I didn't work on the campaign, it's nothing to do with me.
It's a very powerful campaign, and it was, I think,
sometimes charities don't quite get it right for everybody. So I think we're trying, and also it's so important to have feedback and comments like how you feel and like how so many other women feel the same thing, because now, for the next time, for any charity involved, we can say, okay, well, that campaign might have worked for this pocket of women. What other campaigns can we be doing with different types of language who could work for the other pockets of women who may not resonate as well with the certain
But
things
from a
that we're saying?
fundraising perspective, it's a fantastic campaign, because for people watching it, flicking through a magazine or on the TV and who haven't been impacted would think, God, you know, let's turn this around. But for me as a patient, it was like,
Exactly.
You know.
There's a lot.
So now I just wanted to say, so I was sitting in our Breast Cancer Haven Centre in London today with our centre manager, who was reading medical letters from, because we exchange information with the hospital about the people that we're seeing. And she said to me, listen to this. She didn't give me a name. She said, listen to this. And she read out the staging data from a woman. And then that was how she started. Then she read out the staging data now. And because of treatment, she had, like you said, she'd gone from stage 4 breast cancer to being clear, completely clear. And it's remarkable that these things are happening, as you say. It's not, in the past, I think, there was always a kind of an excuse about if somebody happened to do well, there was kind of a it's just a fluke kind of thing. But now, with the advances in treatment, personalised treatment, we'll be getting more into genetically, designed treatment for individuals. The future is really very hopeful, and I think that there's a real chance of us making great strides in breast cancer treatment, and also in the way that we support people's lives in that experience to go forward. So I think it's a new era that we're moving into.
What you said about fundraising is really interesting, actually, because we need to be funding more stuff for those who are affected by secondary breast cancer. In order to do that, we need to raise more money. In order to raise more money, we need good campaigns. So it's really difficult to kind of marry up every element of it, because you are right, our Unsurvivors campaign raised us an incredible amount of money, and for that we are really grateful, which means we can fund more secondary research, and it means that we can keep funding those labs who are looking into things to do with secondary breast cancer. If we didn't have the campaign, we wouldn't have raised the money. So it's so difficult to make sure that your campaign is appealing to every audience and making sure that you're getting the money in and engaging people, but using the right language that feels appropriate for everybody involved. So it's very difficult. We've got a lot of things that we're trying to get out of one campaign, and sometimes you can't quite hit everything for everybody.
I think, on that note, a while ago, cancer charities used to always refer to people who had got through cancer as heroes, and that was like there was a big issue in like the cancer community, that calling someone a hero for getting through cancer doesn't really help them, because it doesn't help them if they know people who've, or like if you're someone who hasn't like fully got it through, like am I not strong because I'm getting through this? Have I failed? And it also kind of puts you on a different like playing field. Like, you've got to do something amazing with your life because you've got through breast cancer, or because like, this is something that I struggle with a lot. Like, I say to someone, I'm at Cambridge, and I'm like, oh, I've had cancer, like, oh, that's really, like, well done you. And I'm like, I got to Cambridge because I got to Cambridge. I didn't get to Cambridge because I had cancer. And I think when people start relating words like being called a hero or whatever it is, and I think it's actually become so much better that charities are listening to what we're saying as survivors and as and just anyone listening to how campaigns affect us. And I think it's become so much better. Like, in this way, I think that social media has been a good thing in that people have been able to react to things like to the source, rather than it being a case of like, oh, I've got to write a letter
very
about
quick. Very immediate, isn't it?
I think like just on that as well, as Pink Week, I think this year Isabel and I, like, when we were making educational materials and anything out there, we really tried to avoid like any battle language, because it's a conversation that has been had before. We were like, we're not going to fall into that trap again. And it's hard because sometimes you don't know what another way of writing is because you're so used to the rhetoric, but it's just making that little conscious effort to kind of ensure your audience feel comfortable. I think we possibly don't have time for any more questions from us, so we want to let the audience think. But first, can we just give our speakers a quick round of applause, and then we'll open up to the audience. Okay, does anyone have anything they'd like to ask? Yeah. Oh.
Hello. I also represent CATS at Cambridge, and we had a freshers fair, and we have a few models of breasts, and we were trying to engage people to come along and try and feel the tumour in the breast, along with a few other elements in it. And what I was quite surprised about was that a lot of people were scared to do it, which I guess that is self-explanatory. And then also a lot of people didn't know what to do, and also it was the women were a lot more engaged than the men. So I'm wondering what your thoughts were in terms of that, and also just generally when there's that whole campaign about check your breasts, but a lot of people don't know how to do it, or maybe are too scared to do it. So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know if I should really answer this because Emma already knows my thoughts on this. So as someone who has kind of, like, I know that we do have to tell people, like, the 3-check thing. And I do think it's an important thing that there's more information that, or like even just a link to people. This is how, like, a link to a YouTube video of how to check yourself, because if you just, like, I don't know, like, just kind of grab them, it's not going to do anything. And also it kind of takes the fear away, and you know what you're looking for, rather than just being like something that's naturally there. So I think that's really important. So but like, we're trying to develop an app for this, but it's a bit of a slow progress. But go on.
And I think the idea, like charities like Copper Feel, it's the kind of know your normal, know what's normal for you, because our bodies and our breasts are, we're all so different but the same. So it's that familiarity. But I know that there's also been the kind of argument of not checking too, not obsessively checking, and kind of just making it something, that
should be just a routine.
A routine thing, kind of once a month.
Yeah, we often tell women to check when you're having your menstrual cycle, because it's just a natural thing that's going to happen. But I think a big thing that actually people don't know is that you need to check from your underarm to your, and like that's
and it's things like puckering, and it's nipple pouring in, and it's skin change and texture, but I think
there's a fear around it, I think. So I think if there was kind of sometimes, society's getting much better about opening these kind of things up, so maybe they could start trying to be more open about things like this.
Yeah, and I think with brands like Copper Feel, or charities like Copper Feel, like they make it fun, and obviously it shouldn't be something that is fun, but they make it less scary by just being called something like Copper Feel, kind of having the pun in the name, and I think that's making a real impact, especially for young women.
And the kind of a campaign that was created by a lovely lady from the Lorraine Show and the producers on the Lorraine Show who went through treatment last year and then created the check thing for the changing rooms. You know, when you go into a changing room, the automatic.
Oh, that's so good. I haven't heard
Yeah, and that's done really, really well. So you're in a changing room wherever, in Topshop or anywhere, or Marks and Spencer's, and you've got the sign on the back of the door, and so you're trying your top on and maybe having a
I think just this goes back to just like meeting people where they're at, whether it's fundraising, whether it's spreading information and awareness. And I think that's...
But in a gentle kind of soothing, you know, because I think no one wants to be bombarded, and we're all so fundamentally scared of illness, and I think it's just, it just gets getting the level right all along, isn't it? And just, you know...
I just think in the future it'd be a good idea to have it in like education in like sixth forms, because if you're getting into a habit when you're like 17, 18, you're going to have that lifelong. And I don't think people realise that you can still get breast cancer when you're that
That's
young.
why Chris from Copperfield, she was 23 when she was diagnosed, having been sent away so many times. And I think that's, if I think of my daughter who's now 10, and obviously as the daughter of someone with breast cancer, she will have earlier screening. But it wouldn't have occurred to me as a 17, 18, 25, 30, you know, it wouldn't have occurred to me. It was something that older women got, and it's changed, as we know, it's changing, and then it's just...
I don't think it's a big thing for them to include in like sex education in school.
I know we did a lot of work around almost normalising the checking, I guess. So we ran a full campaign where all of our ads were just like a picture of a teacup and then said, remember to check, and a picture of a toothbrush and said, remember to check. And it was just all of those kind of things of not, like you were saying, not making it a full, almost activity that you need to be checking your breasts, just thinking, when you do this thing, also think to check as well. And when I was a university student, we ran a full campaign to get that you can get shower stickers that have every symptom you should be looking out for and how to check them. And we got those across all of our halls in all of the showers, which was incredible. So it's just putting it into our everyday life so that even for people who aren't thinking about it, it becomes less scary because, like you were saying, you go to the changing rooms and it's there, or Breast Cancer Now have got them all in Asda and M&S bras. It's just a literally stitched in label in the back. So it's just all of those kind of things where you're constantly being reminded as you're going about your daily life. It's also a little add-on to remember to check rather than making it a huge, scary thing that you need to set aside some time to check your breast. You just also do it while you're doing this thing.
Like Cats in Cambridge, we have them on beer mats in some of the colleges, so that's kind of really cool. And it's just a little cat with like 3 bras on saying like check yourself. So
that. And it is the normal, and it is knowing our own bodies, isn't it? You know, we're so stuck in our heads most of the time that, you know, we don't even know what's going on with the neck. And how many of us actually know, stand in front of the mirror and actually, men as well, checking for men, because as we know, we get there's about 350, 400 men diagnosed with breast cancer each year. So, you know, if men find a lump in their chest, are they going to even think about breast cancer? So I think there's an awareness as a community, and I mean, this comes back to pinkness and everything, but, you know, are we able to kind of raise awareness in all levels of, all ages and all people to be aware?
We might have time for just one more question from the audience, if we do have one, or if not, we can ask. Yeah.
Hiya. I was wondering, so there's obviously a time and a place to raise awareness about different things. For example, this involved close conversation is a good place to talk about some of the maybe more hard-hitting issues, such as secondary breast cancer. To me, it seemed as though like the larger fundraising events, like you look at the size of this compared to the size of the Pink Week ball, there were, I don't know, 500 people at the ball and not as many here. The same with park runs or whatever. How do you fit in the more harder hitting conversations to raise awareness to more people when most people are at those events where it's not appropriate to talk about something like that? I guess for me personally, the biggest take home, or the really funny thing about that is I didn't know about secondary breast cancer until my mum was diagnosed with it. And you're right, it went to her lungs and her liver, exactly as you said. So what are your thoughts about that?
Can I just say from a Pink Week perspective, maybe, thank you very much for the question. It's something we really thought about this year. And it's criticism, well, not criticism, but it's a comment that people have made before. And I agree, like the ball attracted so many people. And we didn't feel like it was the right time personally at something like a ball to bring up something that might upset people who were there. And obviously we don't want the conversation to be upsetting, but sometimes it is. So I think that was probably our reasoning for that decision. But we've tried this year really hard to get an educational aspect into every single event. So we have a little educational speech that Isabel's helped us write for someone at each of our events to give. And we've also got our leaflets, which we'll be giving out every single event as well. But it's been hard to encourage people to come to the educational events, and it is something we're not really sure how to rectify. Maybe your advice is good on that. But we hope that if people engage with one of our events at Pink Week, then they might look towards our other material and then see some of the slightly more difficult conversations to have on that.
Yeah, we've also been working on including all the educational leaflets on our website to make that more educational. So if people don't want to grab a leaflet because they don't want to take the paper, so that provides another sphere for them to inform themselves.
Yeah. It's hard. It's really hard. I think coming from a fundraising perspective, ultimately, if everybody's really honest with themselves, if you have the opportunity to go to a really cool, fun event, not that this one isn't, sorry, it's great, or somebody hands you a 30-page booklet and says, sit down and read that, if everybody's honest with themselves, you guys probably wouldn't go home and read every single page of that 30-page booklet. I think it comes back to what we were saying of meeting people where they're at, in that you've got to start somewhere. So at every single one of our fundraising events, like the girls, we make sure that something is said that's educational, or something is said about the work we're doing and the people that it's affecting. The most effective way that we found is getting people to talk about it, because, like I said earlier, I am not the best person to talk about a cancer diagnosis or how that feels or how that affects me. But we have so many supporters, as I'm sure does every other charity, about what that feels like. So any of our really big fundraising events where we know we're going to have a lot of people in one room really engaged, we get somebody in who can talk about that. And then we make it as accessible as possible. So the people who pick up on one line from that and get a bit interested in it can approach us, and we've got all of those resources available, because sometimes it can be quite intimidating if a charity comes to you and tries to give you every piece of information under the sun. You're just going to switch off, you're not going to listen. Whereas if somebody comes to approach us and asks a specific question about one bit of our research, we can go in and we can talk about that and we can get people more involved. So I agree with you, it's really hard in fundraising, it's really difficult, but I think we're getting there. And I think it's just about meeting people. And if somebody wants to know every bit of our research and is really science-focused, I can chat about that. If somebody just thinks it's quite cool that we have a helpline, I can also talk about that. So making it engaging for whatever audience you're at, and making sure that you're almost not drip-feeding, but keeping it appropriate for the level you're at and the event you're at, but keeping the cause and ultimately why everybody is in the room and why people are here at the heart of everything that you're doing, I would say. But it's tough.
I think so, but also there's nothing wrong with having some fun either, I think. You know, sometimes we just need to think it's good to go out and have a really good event and have a great time, and you know, the message is in the background.
I think that's the thing, as you were saying as well, it's really hard to fund research without awareness of something, which then might mean that you're engaging with something that is perhaps contradictory to what the research is funding. So I know we really tried, even at the ball, to have like a small space where people could write personal messages of things that they'd either experienced or had other people experience. And I think it is really important, like in all the fun, to just have like a moment, to have that time to reflect. And I hope just like throughout the week, that's why we have such a variety of events going on, so people have that time to reflect. And I think just generally talking about it is the only way forward.
People aren't going to want to engage in every single aspect of your charity. As much as I would love them to, they're not going to. So I think it's just giving people the space to whichever bit is the one that they're keen on. They can come to us and they can get involved in that small aspect. And we can mention that all of the other little bits are going on and there's so much else that's happening, but ultimately allowing people to say, well, this is my bit and this is what I really enjoy and what I need right now. So just let them do whatever they need to do to engage with us, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully having a variety of resources as well, sort of like like you were saying, having an app, but also, you know, we have the website or the Instagram, or we can promote a book about it. You know, I like, then people can choose how they want to process the information. Which I think is really important. I think, sadly, that's probably all we've got time for. But we do have a small gift for our speakers, and we will be, I don't know if you all are around, but we will probably be in the bar afterwards if anyone would like to have a conversation about anything we spoke about. So, yes, sorry. But thank you all very much for coming, and for Pink Week as well, if anyone, all Cambridge-based people, we've got loads of events happening this week, so definitely check out our Facebook, which has our term card of events, and also we have some donation buckets at the back.
And there's also some leaflets, which I think are outside on the table, but our stewards will kindly be giving them out as you're leaving the door.
So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah,
and
thank you
should
so
we give
much.
our panellists
Yes.
a round of applause as well?